sorority house plagued by obscene phone calls becomes a stalking ground for a murderous maniac. To be fair, I think Barb had a few more choice words that are a little more gratuitous than anything the caller did.
You're a real gold-plated whore, Mother.
See you next week.
So why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge. You can't rape a townie.
Yeah, it's kind of a competition at this point. The film was directed by Bob Clark and written by Roy Moore. No, not the judge. There is actually a writer called Roy Moore, but unfortunately, because of Judge Roy Moore's exploits, I haven't been able to find a photo of the writer. Thank you, politics. The film stars Olivia Hussey, Margot Kidder, Marion Waldman, and John Saxton. Marion Waldman passed away only a few years later. She only had like 4 movies after this one, but I would have loved to have seen more of her. She was an absolute gem in this movie. Though that could be because of the glistening in her eyes as she was pickling herself with all the liquor. Make of that what you will, but she was still a great character in my book. The film is an absolute masterpiece. And Olivia Hussey as Jessica is fantastic. I know in my previous review I really didn't like her that much. I think it's because she was speaking with a foreign accent and it was very distracting for me. But now that I've seen a lot more films and have matured as a critic, or at least as far as a guy can mature when he goes on camera wearing bacon pants, I appreciate her for the performance that she put on, and honestly, I think she really nailed it. I really should have been a bit more careful with my assessment in the first review, but now I can make up for that in this one. The story manages to flesh out characters beautifully, balance the joy of Christmas, the realities of college, and the terror lurking in the shadows. On top of that, the cinematography is phenomenal, making the camera a character itself that switches between being a spectator and a predator. I'm not kidding. There are times when that camera is roaming about and you either feel like you're participating in a party or stalking your next victim. It's really one of the lost arts of the slasher films. There are a few cases where you see that being used, but nothing like this anymore. The movie brought together all the hallmarks of a true slasher and is arguably the first slasher in movie history. Even though there are movies that have had aspects of slashers, this is the one that was the first to bring so many of those characteristics together. Things that are now cliches and tropes were revolutionary at this time. To have one movie with so many of them, and to give you an idea how many there are, if you tried to do a drinking game with taking a shot every time something that is commonplace today or clearly influenced movies in the future, you would be passed out by the halfway mark. And by comparison, the Nostalgia Critic was pretty damn plastered by the end of his It review after playing the Stephen King drinking game, but was not dead. I'm pretty sure if you tried to do that with this movie, before you even got to the end scenes, you would be flatlining. The music is both eerie and unnerving, but subtle enough not to bludgeon you with its introduction. Yeah, I know when I talk about songs that bludgeon you with their presence, I immediately think of Halloween, being that the soundtrack to that Michael Myers theme. It's just so scary when it comes up, but when it comes to a soundtrack that builds up to a scare, I would prefer Black Christmas. It's not the scare itself, but it does set up the environment, and it had some suspense that builds to that moment when the killer comes out. And I also appreciate the symbolism behind using a broken piano for those very unusual and unnerving sounds. It really does play into the overall story. And that's not the only sounds that are set up with symbolism. The phone calls that the killer makes sounds like the sounds of his victims as they're taking their last breath. It's, I believe, called a death rattle, the sound that symbolizes the way that you die, and that in itself is very eerie and unnerving. almost as unnerving as all of the liquor bottles throughout the sorority house. There's a lot of them. Black Christmas has got probably the best villain I have ever seen in a horror film, because you don't know who he or even she is. And yeah, you could say that the killer is Billy, but we don't actually know. Just because the name Billy is used in those phone calls, we don't know if the killer's actual name is Billy. It could just be his pseudonym, or it could be him reliving a certain experience. We don't know. For all we know, the killer is Agnes. And the other thing you should keep in mind is that when those phone calls are made, there's multiple people making those sounds. It's not just one person. In fact, there is a woman that is making those sounds. The one who talks and then you think she's Agnes. There was an actual woman who was there for those recordings, but no one can remember who she is. So, yeah, that really adds to the whole mystery about this. Anyone who is listening to this review and hasn't seen the movie, go out, watch it, and buy it. Add it to your collection. It is fantastic. It is not a major gore fest. It's not exploitive in any way. It's really a really solid movie for the holidays. Assuming that your holidays normally involve bloodshed with your relatives, which nowadays that's becoming more common. Anyway, the movie comes in at a perfect 10 out of 10. I could nitpick things. I really could. But when you look at all that's gone on in the film and how many layers upon layers it has, it's a moot point. There's no reason why I would point out anything, because it's immediately going to be crushed by all the other phenomenal things that happened in this film. So, for my review, I'm saying that this is a perfect movie. Sure, there's some things that you can pick apart, but honestly, this is a damn fine example of filmmaking. So, hope you loved the review, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.